Okay, good evening. Thank you for being here. I'm going to go ahead and reconvene the meeting and welcome you to this workshop of the Coeur d'Alene School District 271 Board for May 20th, 2019. Before we get going, will gentlemen please remove their hats, and everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, before I turn it over to Dr. Cook, I'm going to go ahead and just introduce the participants up front here. Starting at my far right is Ms. Lynn Town, Clerk of the Board, and then Dr. Steve Cook, our Superintendent. To my immediate left is Lisa May, our Vice Chair, Tom Hearn, Trustee, Tamara Pickford, Trustee, and Jen Brumley, Trustee. My name is Casey Morrisroe, and I'm the Board Chair. Tonight's meeting is a workshop, and no public comment will be taken. You may submit questions and/or comments to the clerk, Ms. Town, and she will get those to the board and the superintendent. Okay, so Dr. Cook, excuse me, real quick. Is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved. Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries, Ms. Town. Now, Dr. Cook, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Chair Morrisroe. If you recall, last fall we entered into an agreement to commission a systemic curricular audit with CMSI. Very intense and kind of deep diving project to kind of establish current state. And it felt like it was a really good time to take that on and check with outside sources to see where we were going with regards to the work that we're getting ready to do for a strategic plan. And if you recall, it was actually a suggestion from the interim superintendent to start the project, that he had done one of these when he was superintendent in Boise and got actually really good results from the recommendations that came from that. And we are here now ready to have that information presented to you. 364 pages. We're going to release this to the public tomorrow at the close of business. We're going to spend some time with our cabinet and our principals tomorrow, kind of diving into this. This has just recently been released to us, so we're both, I think, excited for the possibilities and really just want to, as we dig into this, I think it's important to keep in mind the intent and purpose. Remember, this is a deficiency audit. So the only things that are necessarily commented on are the things that we are not delivering to a level that meets audit standards. And so I think that's a great thing to keep in mind. So it's, when you read 364 pages of this, it can be, it can raise your eyebrows. And I think it does give us some reasons to think about what our next steps are. But it also, one of the things I'm most excited about, and Kay Coleman is here from the firm. She was our lead auditor, and she was a pleasure to work with during this process. It gives very explicit direction for us to grow in areas that are going to benefit our students. And I think that is, there may be a want to look backwards and say, how did we get to this place, and whose neck should we hang this around, and what should we do to make sure that cages are rattled. But I want to preface this with, as we start to uncover this and look through the recommendations and the findings, there's a lot there to consume. There's 9 recommendations that come from 17 different findings that I think I've now been in this book 3 separate times, and it takes a lot of deep cognition to start thinking about the path forward on how we can impact that. And I think Kay is here to present that for the firm, and I think she's going to do a fantastic job of giving us some of the information we need to pick the right path forward for the district and for these students. So I'd like to invite Kay up to the podium now and introduce herself and turn it over to her.
Turn this on, right? Is it on now? Yeah. Just coach me on that stuff. It's my pleasure to be here tonight, and really an honor to be asked to come into a system and really look deeply at the system. before we get going on the PowerPoint and thinking about the pieces of this report, I'd like to tell you a couple stories. One is my own exposure as a school leader to the curriculum audit. It was back in 1989. I am really old. And I had recently been appointed as a director of curriculum, instruction, and assessment for a suburban district in the Phoenix area. And I remember the phone call. I didn't apply for the job. I was appointed. And I remember the phone call on my summer vacation from my assistant superintendent. And he said, "Kay, I'm going to appoint you to this position." And I'm like, "But Bob, I don't know anything about curriculum. I might be a good principal, and I know I was a darn good teacher, but I don't know anything about curriculum." So I went about looking for a way to do a needs assessment in my system. We were a poppin' district. We were building 3 schools a year, a comprehensive high school about every 4 years, middle schools every couple of years, and elementaries they were all over. It was huge growth. And scared me to death because I did not know. And so I started digging, and I found the curriculum audit. And I studied it, and I went to my boss and said, I just think we need to do this. We're a growing district. We have a good reputation. We're a solid district, but we are getting ready to be huge, and we don't know what we are doing. We are in a position of really having some questions about where we are. So the audit team came in. I started that job in July, and in October and November, I believe, that audit team came in. And they did an analysis similar to this, not quite this long. But it was eye-opening for me. And I will say to you that it changed my life as a young administrator. It changed our district's life. And what I saw the power of coming out of an audit was getting to that point of not pointing fingers. Dr. Cook said that, not trying to find blame, but saying, here's where we are. I say an audit is like taking a big old table and putting all your stuff on the table and being very public and very clear about it. This is where we are. Good, bad, and indifferent. Some things we're really good at, some things we're not so good at, some things we kind of stink at. But putting it out there and saying that, and then saying, so what are we going to do? How do we move this organization to another level of excellence? I believe that the mere act of inviting us in to do an audit is an act of guts. Audits are not for weenies. Audits are for systems that really want to get better and to really look at themselves through those eyes of how do we make this next move. A good friend of mine back when I was a young administrator said to me at one point, it's one of my very favorite quotes, and it's quite folksy, but it's true. Where you are is an okay place to be. It's just not an okay place to stay. And you guys, as a system, your kids do pretty well. They outperform most of the kids in this state in terms of assessment in your state. But I know that's probably not good enough for you, for any of you. You want to be the best. And so I commend you, number one, for taking it on. And I'm sure when you got the audit, because it is a deficit audit or it is an exception report, I'm sure you wondered, what in the world have we done? Did you think that once or twice as you were reading it? I view that my perspective on that is completely opposite from that. It is a sign of being bold and saying we are going to put ourselves to the test, and we're going to make these changes over time. This is huge. Just to do the work that we talk about in the recommendations in this report, minimum 3 to 5 years to do the work, but that's not institutionalizing change. That's just getting some of the beginning work done, and then the good news is it's never done. The bad news is it's never done. You're always in process because we learn more all the time. So I hope that you can keep that in mind as we go through this work. And as you read, I want to go, the very first thing I want to do is go to Appendix P in the report, which were student quotes. We don't normally put them in a list like this, but your middle school and high school, we did focus groups in all the middle schools and high schools. And this is a kind of one of those, these 2 pages make you love them and make you go, whew, kids always tell the truth, don't they? They always tell the truth. But I want to focus on the first 3 things that kids said. I did not realize how great a community we had. Last year was a tough year, and they had our backs. We experienced immediate feedback of love and support. Another student, teachers are super caring, and you can build relationships with them. That can't be said every place, folks. Those are important things that these kids are saying. The third one, students can talk to principals and they'll work to solve the problems. That's just a sampling, but those are very powerful. There's a lot of other stuff that the kids said that will raise the hair on your back a little. So they had some concerns about instruction and things that they felt were just wrong, and concerns about the future and some of the things they wish for. But sometime when you have time and you want to just stop and hear your kids' voices, this is a good place. Every one of us that went into the schools and did these focus groups walked away and said, it reaffirms for all of us how important it is for us to listen to the kids' voice, because they say it all. Here's my plan for this evening. I had given you the kind of my PowerPoint outline, and I have a 4-part plan. The first is I'm going to do an overview of the audit so that you get that whole background. Then we're going to look at the findings, and then we're going to look at recommendations, and finally, at the very end, we're going to talk a little bit about change and the process of change, and how do you unfreeze a system and move forward. Does that sound like a plan? Is that good? You certainly, this is your report, and I want you to get out of this what you need to get out of it, because I want you to understand it. You have it to read and reread and ponder over and throw darts at and whatever all you want to do with it. But so I'm just really doing an overview. We can't do all of this in one evening. So let's start with just the piece around the overview of the audit. And I'll stop every so often for questions, but if you have questions, please don't hesitate to ask, okay, as we go through. See, Missy, he said the firm, Dr. Cook said the firm, and I'm thinking, I've always just been an educator. I've never thought I was a part of a firm, but it is an organization that does this work across the country. The audit is independent and it's external, and it's on the design and delivery of a school system's curriculum and the results within the context and cost parameters. So we try to really think that carefully through, and we report on the findings and the proposed recommendations, and it's performed by trained auditors. That would be us. This is a really quick background. Fenwick English was the creator of the audit. He did the first curriculum audit in 1979. The focus on design and delivery of the curriculum, and very systemic. I think all the departments that aren't part of curriculum think, oh, this is curriculum stuff. And they don't realize that, oh, well, yeah, yes, in fact, but it also impacts every organizational part of the district. Our bias is kids are the reason for our work, right? If we're a system, if we're a school system, this is about kids. Our jobs, no matter what they are to support those kids and that learning. And sometimes we get that wonky in our systems, I think. We've done about 500 districts, 41 states, 7 countries, and it's evolved certainly over time, but there is consistency in the practices that we do. It serves you all as board members and administrators with an objective look at how well the system is delivering teaching and learning to its kiddos, and identifies where this system is in its quest for quality. And it is, as we've said repeatedly, an exception report. Centered on C&I, curriculum and instruction, sorry. But any aspect, we will stop and look at anything else that as we're on site or as we're reading documents. If we think that there's something getting in the way of teaching and learning, we'll stop and do deep dives into that. So that any aspect of operations within the system, that enhances design or delivery of curriculum. We look at it and how well the system has been able to set valid directions for kiddos and their accomplishment, and concentrate its resources to accomplish those things and improve performance over time. Here's the principles that auditors follow: technical expertise. Your audit team this team of 6 people has conducted the affairs of school systems at all levels, from teachers to principals to directors to assistant soups and superintendents, and any job in between. We have a principle of independence, and independence is we have no vested interest. We come in, we know nothing about you. We study you deeply. Anything you find in this report is based on what you told us, someone told us, what we read in documents, what we observed in observations, what we saw in surveys. It all we have to have that full picture. But we have no vested interest before or after the audit. We sign a form that says we can never work for a system that we audit. We can never receive money. We can never consult. We are totally external, and try to keep that really clear. The principle of objectivity, everything that we write is grounded in factually triangulated findings. Consistency, we use the same standards and same methods, and we use those to look at all kinds of systems. So we're very consistent in that. In the materiality, we focus on the selection of the most important findings. So we could have way more than 17 probably, but we chose these 17 because we felt like these were the ones that would be most useful to you all. And full disclosure. If we see something that needs to be talked about, we try to maintain confidentiality, but we believe in full disclosure. This audit team had 6 auditors. We've conducted, as a group, 89 audits in 23 states. Our professional experience is in 5 states, and we have experience at all levels of leadership within the system. We look for control of resources, programs, personnel, clear and valid objectives for kids, internal consistency and rational equity, use of results from assessments to adjust, improve, or terminate ineffective programs, and continual improvement in organizational productivity. Here's the kinds of data sources that we used. Lots of documents, about 134 types of documents. Some of those are 350, 500 pages. So a lot of pieces of paper and a lot of electronic forms that we looked at. We studied 1,900 student artifacts. That's samples of student work. We had 2,382 surveys that were returned to us, SurveyMonkey surveys. The 3 groups were administrators, teachers, and you can look at the numbers inside the document. Teachers, administrators, and parents. We conducted 208 individual interviews and 284 classroom visits. Here's what we expect to find. The school system should be a rational organization that's able to set goals and move its operations closer and closer until there's congruence and alignment. And we use feedback for that. We do not see those written, taught, and tested bubbles up there totally overlapping each other, but pulled together so there is some congruence across the system. Here's the foundation of the model that we use, the alignment of the written, taught, and tested curriculum. Does this have a little, does it, a little light on it? No. The curriculum is the work plan. Teaching is the work, and assessment is the measure of the work. So that's the model that we use when we're thinking about the alignment. This one? I see it, but it doesn't go that far. Okay. Okay. 5 standards. And I'm going to come back to these many times because I want you to kind of get them in your head. So the report is divided into the findings, or 5 different findings. One is control. Control is governance and leadership. Number 2 is direction. That's curriculum and learning. Number 3 is equality, equity, and consistency. Number 4 is feedback and assessment. And number 5 is productivity and resource use. And there's four questions that we ask of each one of those standards. Is it there? It's a design question. So if we're talking about policy, if we're talking about that number 1, control, policy, governance, is it there? Does it exist, is what we're asking. What is its quality? The shorthand for that is it any good? The third one is it used? That's delivery. And 4, does it make a difference? Because we could have the best and most beautiful curriculum documents that are there, but we look at the quality, and maybe the quality is even good. But if it's not used and it's not making a difference for kids, then what are we doing, right? Pretty logical questions that would ask. So we're going to go through these again. Control. The system is able to demonstrate control over its resources, programs, and personnel. You're going to revisit these a couple of times. That's standard 1. Standard 2 is direction. The school system has established clear and valid objectives for kids, for students. Standard 3 is connectivity, consistency, and equity. The system demonstrates internal connectivity, rational equality, and equity in its program development and implementation. My shorthand for this sometimes is, I'm a grandma. So if I had triplet grandkids in 3 of your schools, and they were all in 4th grade, right? Could I, as grandma, expect that those kiddos would have same learning outcomes, not on the same day, but same learning outcomes at the end of the year for their 4th grade year, and likewise for 5th grade? Or is there a lack of consistency there? This is an interesting one. Feedback is the 4th standard, and it is about the system using the results from assessments to adjust, improve, terminate ineffective practices or programs. So often in systems, we keep doing things the same as we've done them for the last 40 years, but we've never stopped to say, is it making a difference? So those 3 questions, right? Is it there? Is it any good? Is it being used? Is it making a difference? And if we don't stop and do that, then we sometimes can spend money ineffectively, and money that could go to other things that would be more effective. Productivity is the final one, and that's where we talk about resources, budget, technology, those pieces that are really a critical piece to us all. The final report, which you have in front of you, is exception or deficit report. In it, you will find an explanation of the audit processes and procedures. You'll find 17 significant findings that have been triangulated and documented. You'll find 9 recommendations, and you'll find an executive summary. And I think the audience may have copies of the executive summary right now. The findings are a description of the existing state, either negative or positive, between a condition at the time of the audit and its comparison with one of those 5 audit standards. Again, 17. Recommendations are the audit team's best advice for addressing gaps in issues and findings. How do you ameliorate those? Recommendations are not a quick fix. Anybody that thinks this is going to be done in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months needs to really think again. There's no magic programs or tools. Publishers would like us to believe there are magic programs that solve everything, right? There aren't. There's just a lot of hard work of putting structures in place aimed at improving kids' learning for all kids. not just the top 1%, but all kids. We will say to you suggested timelines on each of the recommendations. We go up to, say, 3 to 5 years, but that's just to put stuff in place. It's not to institutionalize and make this a long-term, because this is your community. These are your schools. You want whatever happens and whatever improvements happen, you want to be able to look back as Board of Trustees and say, I was there at the beginning of this, and we did this much work, and now, and this is what happened, and now as we continue to go, we can see that base of change that began right here. Recommendations are statements of proposed findings. It has, and you will see, you've already seen if you've looked, the recommendations they're divided into two pieces, one for governance, that's you all as a board, and that's primarily policy, and admin regs come from the superintendent, and then the other one is for the superintendent and his designees, and it's up to him to make those decisions about who's doing what, and then propose timelines. That's kind of a really quick overview. Did it make sense? What questions do you have about that process? Anything? Yes?
Throughout the report, you give recommended timeframes. How tested are those?
Oh, those are recommended by people that have done this work. Big systems, little systems, all kinds of sizes of systems. Urban, suburban, rural, you name it. As systems as small as one school, systems as big as 150,000 kids. So the larger you get, the more bodies you have to be able to do things. You guys are pretty thin at your administrative level, at the district level. So you're not gonna, it's gonna take time, and change takes time. You're gonna make some changes as you go forward. You just have to be, it takes about that time to get things going, get things firmly established. There's some quick things that can be, this looks overwhelming. When you look at those recommendations, you go, holy moly, that is overwhelming. It is overwhelming, but when you step away from it and break it down into action steps, it's very doable. And some of this stuff that sounds very complex is really not that complex. It's just getting focused and making it happen. Any other questions just about process? Okay. We are going to take a gander into findings. And in doing this, we're just going to kind of walk through so you can see what's here and how this is put together and how these findings come. So standard one is control, and it starts on, standard one actually starts on page 21 of your full audit. And it's pretty long. It goes all the way to page 70. So 21 to 70 is about 50 pages. Consistently, you will find in every one of these sections, at the beginning of that finding, where it says standard one at the top of that page, it gives you an overview of what standard one is and what the auditor is expected to find in Coeur d'Alene Public Schools. And then there will be several paragraphs that say, here's an overview of what we found. Findings get really technical. All your data is there. That's where all the data is, and that's where the documentation is. So you can see that goes down, and then you start on finding 1.1. And that one is about board policy. So we hit board right up front. Boom. Board policies and admin regs, or administrative procedures, other parts of the world call them regulations, meet state requirements but need more content and specificity to provide for adequate curriculum management direction to ensure effective quality control. It's a mouthful, and I will give you that. So that starts on 22, and what we've done here, and I just kind of want to walk you through this, because this is kind of your bailiwick that eventually you'll be playing with a lot of this. I think you've done a lot of board policy work over the last several years. But this is a matter of deciding, is it board policy that we need to change or do we have a decent policy and we can go for admin regs? They're two different things. Board policy is the big picture of what needs to be done. Administrative regs is the how. And we don't need an administrative reg for everything, but some policies are pretty complex and they need an administrative reg so that people aren't calling each other on the phone and going, now what do we do about some common problem? Student discipline, students being expelled from school, whatever. Yeah, here's how we do it. We get admin regs that are pretty clear. So you'll see that in this section 22, 23, you will see there's 500, you have 533 policies, procedures, and forms that you have in place. We took out, and that is shown on 24, then we took out 151 documents and analyzed them quite carefully because they specifically had to do with teaching and learning, okay? So when you go to page 28, you'll begin to see exhibits. Does the exhibit piece make sense to you? Do you see our numbering and how our numbering works? If the exhibit says Exhibit 1, that's finding 1. Point 1, that's the first finding. Point 3 would be the third exhibit in that bunch.
Can I just clarify something really quick? And I think it's what you're getting at. So your administrative regulations, those are our procedures, so we're all on the same page. You kind of just define the two. Is that correct?
Administrative procedures are not, they're done by the superintendent and team,
Right.
and they support your policies.
We just call them procedures under policies. Is that correct? Just so we're all on the same page, we're speaking the same language. She's calling administrative regulations. We just call them procedures under our policy currently.
You call them procedures.
call them
They call
procedures.
P. They're P in your,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I know
Right.
that. I actually know that.
And we were having kind of a sidebar conversation about, because procedures are funny in this district in that sometimes they come for board approval and sometimes they don't. And I think kind of the normal intention would be that they wouldn't. I
Right.
think that the policy is more the board's domain and procedures aren't. And it's defined in there, but it's a little fuzzy.
Yeah. And that's just, you have the legal policies that you get from, what's your organization?
ISBA.
Yes, thank you. And those are your legal policies. And then you can also have policies that you develop internally that are important to you. But then it's for the translation for the superintendent and team to develop admin regs. And admin regs are a lot of places, you don't have a lot of procedures. You have some, but you don't have a lot. They're pretty important. They're pretty important for principals, for directors, for folks in the various levels of the organization to be able to say, what the heck does that mean and how do we do it here? But it formalizes it to the point that it makes sense for the practitioner in the field. Kind of makes sense? Okay.
Kay, can I ask you just a question about policy, kind of in general? So, as I look through this, there's lots of talk on policy, and kind of as I reflected on it and ate this in little pieces because it's hard to do it all at once.
Of course.
Just reflecting on the work we've done and that this board and this district's done, a lot of the policies we use are really model policies that are statewide.
Yes.
And I'm assuming because of that, they're fairly generic, right? Because you're trying to fit 115 districts in this state. I'm sure ISBA gets them from NSBA, I'm sure. And so they're trying to be flexible all across the country, right? With tweaks to meet Idaho code.
Every state is amazingly different,
Right.
surprisingly.
So just as I look at it, how do we kind of rearrange the way we do policy or we make policy and inform policy to localize it a little more and
Yeah.
and how do we really examine our policy of what's good policy and what's not good policy? Because that's going to be obviously a critical step because there's lots of policy recommendations and
Sure.
policy tweaks that we're going to need to do in the coming months, years.
And I think you've got a recommendation, which is recommendation number 6. It kind of goes into that a little more detail. But I'm going to tell you that we actually tore into policy here. So this is not a bad place to start, because you can see that if policy is to support teaching and learning, each of these exhibits that you have here, starting with exhibit 1.13 and going to maybe 1.18, I'm not exactly sure where that last one is, they kind of tear, that we have kind of torn your policy apart. Let me show you how that, not in a mean way. Come on, don't laugh. We aren't mean
You should read
people.
it from our side.
Sorry. Well, we try to really analyze it and really think about it from the perspective of, does this support kids and learning? So look at 1.13, for example. That is where we analyze policy for standard 1 for control, okay? And we have one of those for each standard. So you have control, which is 1, 2 is direction. And in that, you will find the audit criteria and characteristics that are listed, like 1.1a, a taught and assessed curriculum that is aligned to the district written curriculum. Well, those are the policies and regulations that we analyzed. You have a partial rating on requires that the taught and assessed curriculum be aligned to the district's written curriculum. You have a 0 on addressing the alignment of the district's written curriculum with state and national standards, because and see, that's just a matter of words. That's just adding a few words in there so that it becomes your policy without. So honestly, this would be where I would start. I'd go to that 6, and your superintendent knows all about this, but I would use these formats. These have been developed over years, these exhibits. They've been developed over years by gads of superintendents and assistant superintendents and board members and people that have really thought deeply about this work. So this begins. Now so you have this, we expect, in order to be, we expect 70% of the characteristics to be met for policies to be adequate. Well, you had 50% on that first one in your policies. But go to the next page, and this is where it takes apart each one of those. So criterion 1.1, here's where it tells you where that came from. It's all detailed. All the way through, all those criterion and all those characteristics. Yes.
Mine kind of dovetails on what Chair Morshaw was asking. And
I'm sorry, I
specifically-
can't hear.
Can you hear me? Specifically, criterion 1.2 was a hard one to understand. And I just didn't know if you could give us an example. Specifically, it's the philosophical statement of the district's instructional approach. 1.2. So I wasn't sure, how.
Yes. Well,
We said, we had part of it, but then part of it was just absent. And so I thought, well, what would this look like? Districts that you've been to, what does their philosophy of instructional approach look like?
and I think that's really thinking deeply about what it is we believe our instructional approach should be.
Okay.
Do we want to y'all just do what y'all want to do? Or do we say we're a system and there's some basics here that we expect? We expect some research-based practices in place. What are those things? You've got gads of folks here that are really schooled in all of this. What should that be? And I think that's where this becomes kind of a fun process of really doing that thinking and visioning for the future of where you want. What does that instructional approach look like? And you're going to hit instructional approach again in Standard 3.
Maybe this is where Casey was asking, we kind of move away from just your state mandated policies are, and this is where we fine tune for our district and
Yes.
through.
Yes, yes. And one of the recommendations is that I don't know what your state school boards association is like. I don't know, but generally, there's some pretty savvy people that have been through this work. Now, and they can be helpful to you. So you may just say, we're going to run a series of workshops and we're going to look at some of those things. So I would say look specifically at recommendation 6, is that what I said? And then these pieces in this will get you to that point. She just gave me the time and I'm like, Holy moly. We're going till 7, but does that make sense? That's kind of your organization in this. This is your area, and this is where you come in heavily in this policy piece. Also included in Standard 1 is a piece around, on 1.2, the organizational chart and the reorg of your district, roles and responsibilities associated in job responsibilities. And that, again, when you read this, hopefully it makes sense to you that you're at 11,000 kids, and I'm just, nobody's told me to say this, but I'm just going to say it. You are really, really lean at the district level to do the work that needs to be done for 11,000 kids. And I know that people always think districts are huge. Well, I am here to tell you I've been in all kinds of districts all over this country, and you are very lean. So this reorg, and I know you're in process of thinking about that reorg, it's really important for you to think about because you can't have one person doing all of curriculum, instruction, assessment. You can't do that. That's just, it's a killer and it doesn't work. And for the long haul, it's not going to benefit your boys and girls and your young people. So that's about that. There's a piece on job descriptions. Your job descriptions, if you keep going through that, starting about page 52, 53 in there, you've got, one of the things that I can clearly say to you about job descriptions is we were only given 27 job descriptions. There are few job descriptions missing related to teaching and learning. And of those 27, 15 had no statements about teaching and learning and curriculum. So remember, kids, we're all in support of kids. What is it we do that supports kids? Even operations side of the house. What do they do? Those buildings are kept clean. Why? Those buildings are kept up to date. Why? Because it's supporting the environment for learning for kiddos. So it's little stuff, but it's little fixable stuff. It's just a matter of attending to what this says, going back into that back under recommendations, and we hope to give you enough information there to help you move forward. Also in this is planning. Finding 1.3 on the bottom of 56. Planning was a big deal here. The district, you as a board have some statements about planning that you expect in your policy, that you expect planning to be in place. And I think it might have to do with the fact that you're pretty lean at the top, and so planning, a lot of planning pieces have not, how do you do them? How do you do them? Do you work 24 hours a day to manage to do planning? But planning across the board was, you'll see it pops up over and over again. So strategic planning for that long-term visioning, which I know you're planning on planning. But in curriculum management planning, assessment planning, those pieces, it's taking the time to stop and think about where you want to be and what you want to do, and writing it down and getting intentional about our actions. Okay, so that's Standard 1. It hits those three things. That's the control piece. Standard 2 is the curriculum direction piece. And I want to just walk you through that a little bit. This is about curriculum management planning, the existence of curriculum, like is it there? We call that scope. Is it there? The quality and specificity of curriculum, is it any good? The consistency, alignment of curriculum and assessments and resources. So this is a heavy one. 2, 3, and 4 are a lot about teaching and learning. This one, I want to point you to one place to just ponder for a second. On the top of 73, we talk about tightly held and loosely held. This is in the recommendation about getting a curriculum management plan and be intentional about the way you approach curriculum design and development. But this tightly held, loosely held is an interesting thing. You see on the left-hand side, tightly held, that's district level responsibilities. The district holds tightly the vision, the mission, the goals, the philosophy, and the beliefs. This is a system that you are governing. The curriculum objectives, learning outcomes for kiddos, the priority standards, the assessments that are used to benchmark and to progress monitor kids, and program guidelines and expectations. Those are held tightly. Over on the loosely held side, and this is often an issue in districts, and I believe it is in yours, around autonomy, teacher autonomy. We've all lived through, and I don't know when you all lived through it, but I know you did, because the whole country did. I actually know you did because I think I was told that too by some in interviews. You lived through site-based management that went perhaps so site-based I don't know, I can't even speak to what that means, but sometimes site-based management goes wonkers. And everything, and then teachers and principals are expected to do everything. They're expected to do the visioning, the missioning, the philosophy, the beliefs, everything is going to be. Autonomy is about saying we're a system and we have expectations for the learnings that our kids will master or will meet by the time they're finishing a grade, a course, a semester. But how it's done, there's some wiggle room there. So as a teacher, when I was a teacher, if I would have been told, you will teach this way, boom, 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 I would have revolted because I was a teacher. I knew how to teach kids. I knew how to get down and learn about where my children were, where my students were, and what they needed next. The curriculum, the expectation is that it is taught, and you hold tightly to that expectation as a system. But how I get there sometimes can be different. So we might have a school that's a Montessori school, or we might have a school that's a STEM school, or we might have a school. So methodology within the school might look a little different. Now, what that doesn't say to you is we're going to tell you that in the written curriculum, you need strategies that are examples for how a teacher might teach this. And you for sure need materials that consistently are available to all teachers at a particular grade, a particular course. But there's some flexibility here. So this tightly held, loosely held is this piece that you all as a system need to make sense of. This work that has been done, and I'm going to botch the name of it, where you've had a PB, help me with the letters, lady, folks. PB. PEBC, I know, I have to get the language back in my brain. PEBC, amazing. We observed, I was saying earlier to Dr. Cook, I'm just talking about classrooms that I observed in, the schools I observed in, where I saw really deep, high-level cognition and high-level thinking and kids carrying the cognitive load in classrooms as opposed to teacher doing all the work, was teachers that have been through that training. That's a really huge thing to say, you know. I mean, that's cool to be able to say that. So there you've got this example of teachers can look different from one classroom to the next. So when I was a young principal, I believed that everybody should teach like this. And I remember really having to face my own self as a principal and my belief systems with a 5th grade teacher that I inherited from another school. They were remodeling. And this teacher came in and she made me crazy the way she taught, made me crazy. I would never have taught that way. I couldn't have taught that way. I would go in and just think, oh my gosh, I just want to chew her up. I didn't, thank goodness, because I saw that she had great results. And she looked really different in the way in which she taught than the teachers that were from my school, that we had done a ton of professional development and were working on kids thinking at very high levels. So this is that piece that you need to think through and process through, and your administrative team needs to think that through. So what you have in Standard 2 is really number 1 on page, wait, the first thing is curriculum planning. You don't have that in place, so we're just going to skip over that. You know you don't have it, and it needs to be done. So get a plan. And we have the list of what you need to do for the plan. Am I being frivolous? I'm sorry, I am. I'm being a little snotty, aren't I? Just do it. Page 78, get it done. It'll get done. You can do it. Page 78 are all the characteristics of what you need in that plan. And then there's the analysis about what you have right now. Page 83 is scope, the scope of the written curriculum. We expect that in the core curriculum, English language arts, science, math, and social studies, that there is some direction for every course that's being taught. So if you teach that core, 100% there should be a scope. So it's that first question, is it there? Is it there? Yes, it should absolutely be there. Non-core, we give you a break and we say 70%. But of course, we would want 100%. But 100% for core, 70%. So here's how yours looks. If you look at your scope, all of those exhibits in 2.2, and the backup of all of those is back in the appendix. So otherwise you would have all those pages in the middle of this reading. For example, let's take, this is a celebration. The scope of the written curriculum in core content courses, grades K to 5. It's on page 86, exhibit 2.2.2. You've got English, language arts, math, science, and social studies, 100%. That's a celebration. That's a good thing, right? It changes as you go down or you go up in grades. At the middle school, it's 79%. At the high school, it's 86%. And you can go through that and you begin to see where you are on, is it there? We're not talking now, is it any good? We're just saying, is it there? So what we know is that there's kind of a summary over on page, sorry, I'm confusing my pages here. Summary on page 89 for the core content courses, and you can see there how many guides were expected, guides available, and percentage over exhibit 2.2.8. See that? So you can see 100% elementary, middle school 79, high school 86. Now the next question after is it there is it any good? So it's quality. Basic quality. We didn't go real deep in yours, we just went to basic quality. And what we found is that there is some inadequacy in quality. So if you go to page, you can see all the things we looked at. I want you to go to page 94. That's a basic, what we call a basic quality analysis. We use that to score your curriculum guides that you have available. So that piece has a potential of having 15 points for any one curriculum. We expect 12 or better for adequacy, okay? So you go to...
Could you expand on the adequacy? Because I was, wondering in my mind, is adequate that we're sure that the teachers have the roadmap to do their job? And as it falls off, are we just then unsure that they're able to convey the content? When you
Teachers don't have the written documents.
They just physically don't have
that helps them get to just basic adequacy. There are many other levels of this. You can, we believe in looking at everything, and wherever a district is, that's where we start. So we start on this, on basic quality, and then there's other levels that we go to, depending on what a district is hopeful of doing and what they're accomplishing. But if you look then, starting on page 95, you'll see the breakdowns. 95, Exhibit 2.3.3, that's English Language Arts Guides, K-12. And you can look down that list, and the highest rating is an 8. This isn't, you don't throw out what you have. You say, all right, so where's the area that we're not so good in? We don't have prereqs and we don't have resources. Or whatever, what are those areas that we're not so good at? That's what this is intended to do. This isn't to say, get rid of what you have. This is say, clean it up.
Do you then prioritize with the courses that receive the lowest score, or not necessarily? I mean,
Say it again.
obviously,
I can hardly hear you. I'm
Do you prioritize
sorry.
with courses that have the lowest score, or not necessarily? I mean, obviously, we start with our core content
start
courses
with core,
first.
yeah.
But then beyond that, you can see that there's some with 2s, and I mean, those are the courses then we say right away, okay, these are the courses that we can quick fix, we can add this, or do you guys give a recommendation on an approach?
I think I would be informed by student achievement. I think I would look at data. That is why there's that whole piece on assessment for you and program evaluation. That's why that's a big piece for us. That's our second recommendation, is that piece. Because that is, be informed by data. Be informed by data. And if the data says kids are doing okay in that area, even though we know those documents aren't so good. But when you get teachers working on this stuff and you get a team working on it, some of this you can clean up really quickly and easily. And some it just takes time and you have to go through a whole new cycle and start a whole curriculum cycle. The recommendations for this particular, for the curriculum development stuff, development work are on their recommendation 3. So that's the curriculum management plan as well as the whole process of design and development. Okay.
Okay, can I ask you a question on your slides here? It's actually the next slide after this one.
Yes, I'll move it.
That first bullet there caught my eye.
I bet it did.
And so I'd like to hear a little bit more of that from you, because I think,
Let me show you an example.
perfect.
Go to section Standard 3. I folded this page back so I could easily find it, and of course I can't, because I thought this is a really nice example. Page 146. We look for redundancy in objectives. We are really geeky, I'm going to tell you that. But it's in service of kids and learning. This is redundancy of Idaho content standards in language arts. And what you have there is a grade level 3, 4, 5, and 6 in writing. And the basic objective of that standard is identical from grade level to grade level. So if you just take the state standards and plunk them down and say, those are our standards, and you haven't done this kind of work, kids for 4 years are not progressing necessarily. And any of us that have been school principals and are in lots of classrooms a lot, or spend a lot of time in classrooms, and you say, this second grade group is doing more complex tasks than this 5th grade group, then you start worrying and you go back and go, what in the world? So this is a matter of training your design teams, your folks that are doing design, curriculum design and development, of really doing that kind of analysis, of looking at it. It's, I think that when I first learned about this, my eyes glazed over, and I thought, holy moly. But the reality is, think what that does for kids if we have a lot of this. So if there is not a level of specificity, so what's different for the 3rd grade kiddo and the 4th grade kiddo and the 5th grade kiddo and the 6th grade kiddo? There should be increasing complexity, and cognitive levels should be high at all levels, but the context and what we're asking, the tasks that we're asking kiddos to do, should become increasingly.
Okay, so take that concept and tell me the impact that does on vertical articulation.
Of not doing it or doing
Right,
it?
the way it is currently, and how much of a challenge that makes for teachers to plan
Yeah, it's
For
crazy for teachers,
a
huh?
K-12
Yeah.
end product result.
Yeah, it's really problematic because if that work hasn't been done and that sequencing and spiraling piece hasn't been done, I mean, you have to come back and reteach things along the way. But if you haven't done that for kids, teachers don't know that the grade level before and the grade level before are doing the exact same thing. They don't know because they're focused on their kiddos and their classroom and trying to do what they need to do. I think sometimes we ask too much of teachers in this regard, and I think these kinds of decisions need to be done at a district level, not throwing it all on the school level to try to figure it out. Because I don't know if I'm a second grade teacher what the sixth grade teacher is doing, and Lordy, you may be doing exactly the same thing.
Okay, could this also be leading to some equity issues from school to school at our elementary? So one principal, catches on, and so we're seeing some differences amongst our elementary schools. Could this be one of the reasons potentially? Is that
Could be.
our standards are so vague for
Could
similar
be.
grades?
Yeah. It's always to scratch the surface and try to understand what exactly is going on. So does this make sense? Basic quality, and then you will see all of those rankings there, and at the back of the book are much more extensive rankings for every course that is taught. Additionally,
Okay, can I ask you a quick
Yes, of
question?
course.
I apologize. I'm kind of going back. I was trying to figure out how to formulate this question. I guess I'm looking for guidance from something that's model. And so obviously I'm not getting it from the state standards, a model that has that progression through K through 5. Where do you find those models? Or do we just have to create them?
oh, I think that your state standards are pretty good standards. I'm not, and I think Common Core standard, the Common Core standards, they're pretty good standards. It's just that work, yes, there should be somebody that fixes that, right?
No, what I'm saying is if we can't look to this 332 that you've pointed out has a ton of redundancy throughout it.
Yes.
So we can't look there to come up with these recommended changes that you're asking for. Where do we go to find a model that would outline those that we could then develop our curriculum from, is my question.
I think you just have smart teachers that do this, honestly. I really do believe that. I believe that mucking around in curriculum work, that's my really folksy term, is sometimes really amazingly important for teachers to do, because they will, I've watched teachers come in to doing design work. You need to have a model, you need a format, you need how you're going to do this work, and that's what your curriculum management plan is. But when people sit down and start, they see this kind of thing, they go, holy moly, I had no idea, and they're able to take it to another level. But they have to be well trained, and that's a piece that you're going to need to do. You're going to have to put time and effort in that, and money probably, to do some training. At the very back of that section, I'll just go forward to page 108. You'll see a summary of those various core curriculum. And you get the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1 is objectives, 2 is assessment, 3 is prerequisite. Do you see that exhibit, 2.3.8? 4 is resources, and 5 is strategies. And that refers right back to sample strategies, examples. That refers right back to that basic model on page 94. It's not awful. It is. My Kent quote, my friend's quote, where you are is an okay place to be, just not an okay place to stay. Okay, so we're here. What are we going to do? Do we have the guts to take it on and do it? Yeah, you do. Of course you do. Right? Got smart people up here in North Idaho. I heard that I can't call it Northern. Somebody has to tell me that sometime, what that reason is. The next thing we did there was, what?
That's how we know you're not from here.
If you say, but I said north. I just have a question about northern. My state is northern Arizona. Okay, you'll tell me someday. The next thing we did was congruence. There's a lot done in that standard. So we started looking at Bloom's taxonomy for cognitive types, and we did a congruency study across. And I don't think I can explain it all here, but it's all in there, and you've got appendices back at the back that go through course by course. On the congruency study, we only looked at 3, 5, 7, 8, and 9, grades 3, 5, 7, 8, and 9, and we looked at English, language arts, and mathematics. We didn't look at everything because there's just a limit in what 6 little auditors can do. But we gave you a sample of how you do it so that you know how to do, your folks know how to do it. They can look at it, or they can pick up a phone and call and go, help me understand that.
Okay, I'm sorry, where are we at?
On pages, congruency, it starts on page 110, sorry.
Okay, thank you.
So that's standard 2. Standard 3 is, do you want to stop there? Do you have questions? Are you good? Okay. Standard 3 is around connectivity and equity. We're going to fly through this, but I want to just point a few things out. The first piece that we looked at here was professional development. And you've got a lot of professional development going on. And by all reports, good things are happening. But we're pushing yet again for a comprehensive plan that really takes the time to intentionally set the stage for where you want this all to go. You'll find the first, on page 118, Exhibit 3.1.2, that's the criteria that we use to analyze the plan or what a district has in place, and immediately following that is an analysis of those plans. Some things that I just think maybe there's some great quotes here all the way through. There's a quote on the bottom of 122, the professional development for Teacher Leader Academy is great. Then there's a thing about block schedule at Lake City High School. When they started the block, there was not much training on how to teach in a block schedule. Wow. So those are things just to be, any time a new change is brought to you as a board, you probably need to ask the question, so what are we doing on professional development? Right? Is that a good question, Dr. Cook? How are we doing that? How are we going to bring people up to snuff? Often an adoption is made, curriculum isn't written, people adopt materials, vendors come in and they do how to use the book. And that's all teachers get. So really saying, let's go deeper than that. There's a piece on here on instructional strategies. It goes back to your question earlier about instructional strategies. That's on 125. There is a whole section on classroom observations in here and your findings, the findings on classroom observation. Some frightening stuff, things that like I just want to go cringe, but also some things that are really good. So we saw a lot of large group teacher-centered direct instruction. That's one way to teach, but it's not the only way. And we saw a lot of kids listening. At the middle school, pretty significant numbers of classrooms. 51% of all the classrooms in the middle schools that we observed, kids were listening. And I think on 132, just some areas that you just want to say, okay, let's just pay attention here. Effective teaching strategies. This effective teaching strategy piece, we took Marzano's work and some of the research-based work that's out there, since you all didn't have a model, and we just developed, what would we look for in classrooms that we expect to see. And there wasn't a lot of variety of some of the high research-based strategies being used. And in fact, in about 22% of the classrooms, we didn't see any effective instructional strategies. Then cognition is another thing. And I think a lot of times people think that cognition, the levels at which we expect kids to operate and think. There are a lot of people that believe that more homework, heavy load of work on kids is good. Well, I would challenge you to say, maybe. But what I care more about, and what I think the literature cares more about, and what we see is more important, is the level of the cognitive level that kids are operating at. If it's just being redundant, regurgitating, a kid regurgitating knowledge, that's a really low level of understanding. And little kids to big kids can think at really high levels. And so if you go back to the Bloom's taxonomy that was in another section, I think it was Exhibit 2.3.9, we summarized that. You can see that those high levels of synthesizing, evaluating, and analyzing, the stuff you want kids to really be doing, it wasn't done a lot here. We saw a lot of remembering and understanding, a little bit of applying, and the applying, interestingly enough, was in mathematics, which is interesting. So those pages immediately following 133, 134, 135, I guess 134, you can see a summary of, in the core content, math, science, social studies, and English language arts, where kids were operating when we were in there. Now that's a point in time. It doesn't mean it's always there. It just means for that point in time it was there. But point in time observations are good to do. And I'm gonna speak on behalf of teachers on this, because I believe, with very few exceptions, that teachers intend to do the very best with their kiddos. They entered the profession because they like kids and they want them to learn and they want to challenge them. And sometimes we as systems squash that out. And so you get people speeding through materials to cover materials, and then you can only get that pretty low level remembering and understanding. And you have a hard time. It takes time for kids to process, just like it does us, for us to process things. It takes us time, doesn't it? We don't just do it automatically. We have to have time to think and process, and how am I going to apply that? So I want to say that this should not feel like this is beating up on teachers, because it's not. This is just a point in time. This is what we saw. Speaks to professional development. It speaks to expectations, perhaps speaks to what's in the written curriculum. I can't tell you what the reasons are, but I'd be digging into that to try to understand it and figure it out. Differentiation is another piece, and that's on page 135. Yes.
Part of, as I look at that, is kind of the lack of direction from as far as what our expectations are for instruction, what instruction we look at, what our
Yeah.
expectations are. And I see that somewhat of it's been systematic, right? Obviously, it was observed 20 years ago. It's still in place, but just with the frequency of turnover that we've had at the top in the district office,
Sure.
superintendent,
Sure.
I mean, I very much feel that.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a rudderless ship,
Yeah.
or had been.
Yeah.
And does that make sense as far as why some of that's present?
I certainly think it can make sense. Yeah. Changes. We need consistency. I mean, I sat for a little while this afternoon when I first arrived with several of your top leadership team, and I said to them, you are the right people to do this job. You're the people, but there has to be consistency over time. And when you're shifting, I think sometimes we jerk teachers around. Oh, we're going this way now. Oh, we're going this way now. As opposed to saying, okay, let's get a plan and let's go there. And if we want our kids to think at high levels, let's make that a priority. If we want our kids to be working together in groups, let's make that a priority. But do it, we call it pedagogical practices that are good in some subjects that aren't as good in other subjects. So mathematics and science, for example. You want kids problem solving, you want them digging in, you want them spending time doing experiments and doing a whole lot of variety of things. And if I'm just being jerked around and not told that I need to think deeply, and teachers try to please their boss, whoever their supervisor is. So yeah, consistency in a system is really important. And when there is a in and out of leaders, it's really hard on a system. I'm going to say the system that I was in, that we had the biggest change in practices, was a system that the senior leadership team stayed together for 12 years. And we worked it every day, but so did the principals. The principals were right there with us, and so did the teachers. I mean, the whole system, we were headed roughly west, and wherever west is here, I don't have a clue. But it's that way, roughly west. But we all knew what we were doing. We had a common vision for what we wanted to see happening in classrooms. We didn't have teachers tied to every teacher on the same page at the same time doing the same thing, but we had a common vision. And if you change leadership all the time, the messages get shifted sometimes. I think it's a huge problem in education at large. Yeah. Okay. It is now what time?
6:23.
Okay. Do you get the idea of this? Does this make sense? Are you, there's a whole thing on monitoring classrooms, all of that. I want to go to 4 because Standard 4, which starts on 193, because I want you to realize how important this is. This is the whole piece about assessments and program evaluation. And you have, you will see, of course we're going to call for a plan again, right? So page 196 gives an evaluation of what you currently have for a comprehensive assessment plan. And then the analysis of that is right behind there. And the scope of assessment starts on page 203. Here's what we know about you. Your kiddos outperform the bulk of the state. You're at the top of the bulk of the state in assessment. That's a good thing. But your kids are, your student achievement is static. Why is that? Okay. Your student achievement is static, and when we get down to groups of kids and trying to look at gaps between one group and another, you've got gaps, and in some places those gaps will never be closed if you keep doing the same thing you're doing, only louder. I call it laminated lesson plans. If you just keep doing the same old thing every year, and so that kid didn't learn that, I'm just going to do it again, I'm going to teach them again, or whatever that is. I mean, I think it's our mentality at a system level as well. You need assessments. Every course, and it's quite clear, you've got in your finding, or in your recommendation on assessments is the second recommendation. And program evaluation. Program evaluation is really stopping and looking at how are we doing given this, for this program. We know that you've got a lot of interventions. This is in Standard 5, a lot of interventions in place. They're not being evaluated. Nobody really knows if they're making a difference for kids. So really stopping and breathing and thinking. This assessment piece and program evaluation piece is a critical piece of your future if you want to. I don't think this is about buying assessments. I don't think it's about assessing kids ad nauseum. I think it's about assessing what we're teaching. So in our perspective, when you design curriculum, you design assessment. So if we say we want our kids to know this, how do we assess that? In quick and dirty ways sometimes, easy ways. They don't have to be real. It doesn't have to be terribly complex, but you need those kinds of. And it's sticking in my brain that you've got about total 70. I don't have the number in my brain, I'm sorry, but, well, I'm looking at this one and I see English, language arts, and mathematics. The scope of assessments at K-5 is 54%, so about half of what kids are being taught is being assessed. But that doesn't mean that the assessments are high quality. So it's really thinking that through. I want to point you to something we call years to parity, and it's in this section on page 219. 218, 219, it goes back a little further, I guess. It starts on 216. And this is an analysis that we do where we take groups of kids. So on 216, this is English Language Arts for all tested grades. We took all students, ELA, as opposed to the Hispanic kiddos. And your Hispanic population is it's your biggest minority population. I think it's about 7%. Am I right? And we looked at them over the last 3 years, and we analyzed it by the gain, the final year gap and the gain. And if you keep doing the same thing that you're doing right now, and don't change anything, don't change it up, those kids will never close the gap. And that goes all the way down for your economically disadvantaged kiddos as measured by free and reduced lunch. It goes down to students with disabilities. And then on the next page, we're looking at math. And in all of that, the only group, we looked at math, science, social studies, and language arts. No, we didn't have social studies because you don't have the data on it. If you look at the chart on page 219 at the top, 4.3.8, and you look at those three groups, we chose Hispanic, economically disadvantaged, and kids with disabilities. English language arts, keep doing the same thing over time. In Hispanic kids, never will close the gap. Economically disadvantaged kids, never. Students with disabilities, never. Science, never, never, never. Math, never, never for economically disadvantaged and disabilities, but with Hispanic kids, 6.7 years. Well, you only have them in school for 13 years if they start in kindergarten, right? So it's a really interesting thing. We encourage whoever's doing assessment work and curriculum work to do this at least once a year, to do some of this analysis, because it's one of those places that you go, how we doing? How we doing with our kiddos? Where's those gaps? Okay. We're like out of time, are going to be out of time here shortly. So I could see the 6:30 note coming my way. I saw it in your hand. Thank you for being my timekeepers. Standard 5 is about budgeting practices and programs and interventions and facilities and technology. And I think I'm gonna go to the budget piece. You have a perfectly normal, traditional budget process that you use. It's how the majority of the world of public education does budgeting. We would recommend to you, and we will in the recommendations, that you think about budgeting in with a cost-benefit analysis and how it links to teaching and learning. Kids are here. Everything else is here. The buses, the guys that clean the school, the budgeting process, everything else is in support of. And when you divorce them and you keep them apart, divorce, I don't know where that word came from. My son is going through divorce right now, and I'm like, oh, oh. When you break those apart, hard. It's hard to get changes and hard to see that. So that budgeting process is something that you're going to see in recommendations. I had a note from there in technology. I just want to say that I had a little note from Seth about some things that apparently we weren't given at the time for whatever reason. So there's might be some little changes in this pages on 230 and 231, but pretty much that's the same. You'll also see the use of technology in your classrooms on 233, and the SAMR model in 235 in there. That's really interesting stuff. Okay, we're going to stop there for a minute. I know I missed all kinds of things. How are you feeling about these? Do you feel heavy? Do you feel heavy? Is this heavy on your shoulders when you hear these findings and you read them?
Okay, we got to get you a mic if you're going to walk around. Sorry.
Come back. I'm coming back.
Just because we are recording, so this will be.
Do you feel heavy-hearted about this?
Well, how are you not heavy-hearted after you look through this and read it? But also, how are you not excited about knowing this and what are we going to do about it and being ready to tackle this? And I know that as a district and as a team that we're all ready to tackle this and do what's best for kids. That's why each one of us is up here in this room is we want to do what's best for kids.
Yeah.
So there is also that excitement and optimistic. So
Good.
I worry a little, part of my heaviness is the community engagement piece, and how do you package this and present it in a way that the community can get behind it and understand it, and it's not something that we're moving forward. And so I think it's a lot of information, and I'm sure we'll discuss future ways that we get community engagement and understanding, and when we start developing work plans and such. But that piece I worry about.
I think it's the concept of continuous improvement. You know, if you just want status quo, then you probably don't do something like this. If you just want things to stay the same, you probably don't do this. If you're gutsy and you say, this is about our kids and this community for the future, then you do it. And you take it on and say, yeah, who's better than us to do it? But I agree with that. But I do think it's the thinking about continuous improvement. We don't get better by just, I don't know. One of the things I know, a district that I know quite intimately because I did some strategic planning work with them in my city, everything had to look pretty on a piece of paper for them. Their PR person wanted everything to be flowery and beautiful, and aren't we grand? Well, they are grand in many ways. Lots of flowery and beautiful, and aren't they grand? But when they did an audit, I wasn't involved in that audit, but they came back and I saw the PR person trying to make it flowery and beautiful, and I said, you can't, at some point you just have to say it. You have to just say it. Here's where we are. We got a bunch of things going for us that are good. We have great kids. We have great families. You've got these amazing things going on in our schools. All kinds of good stuff is happening in Coeur d'Alene Public Schools. But is status quo good enough for you? Probably not. It's not good enough for me. It's not good enough for my grandkids. When I look at schools now from the outside, not being inside them, it's like, no. I don't want status quo. I want those kids thinking and working and plugging, But I want it to be a safe place in which they do that. And that's the stuff you've done very well. You have a strong community piece. But I understand how that can be. I know this is hard to read, and I mean, I almost feel your weight, the weight of it for you.
Yeah, and I don't think we should sugarcoat, I understand what you're saying. There's a lot of good things. We have good staff. We have good community.
Yeah.
We have people that want to do the best,
Yeah.
But I don't think we should sugarcoat the report in any way. The report is pretty devastating. And if you look at it, it's pretty negative throughout. When I read it, I went, oh my God. But, as far as a practical thing I was thinking about was this, you do give a recommendation for restructuring the administration.
Yeah.
And that's up to Dr. Cook. That's his lane, not ours. One of the problems we've found over the years, though, I've found that just in the time I've been on the board, there's a huge amount of resistance and pushback from people in the community and from the teachers sometimes, not all of them, but some of them, about having more administrators. They always think, you'll hear, there's too many administrators and blah, blah, blah. Well, we've heard from your organization, that it's very thin. Actually, we've heard it from the state, too. We're below state standards, we're really thin. So I think we're just going to have to be very clear about what positions we need, what are they going to do, and we do, and we fund them. We find a way to fund them. Because I agree, I don't think that, if you look at the tasker here, they're overwhelming by the staff we already have, which are good staff, excellent staff, but
Yes.
we're already working hard, and
Yes.
I don't think it takes some of these things on without additional help.
Yes.
But I'm just trying to talk a little bit about the community politics of the whole thing and
Sure.
the internal politics with
Sure.
the teachers and stuff.
Sure.
About spending money on administrators. I think we need to do it, and it'll be up to Dr. Cook how we do it, but that's a reality we have to deal with.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I don't share quite the devastation that Tom does, but what I would say is I would feel overwhelmed if I didn't genuinely believe that we have a superintendent and a board that's really willing to roll up their sleeves and do it with a cabinet that's going to be behind it. And so for me, while I do feel that this is a lot and there will be more work than probably ever anticipated by any board member to work through these things, I guess I look at it as like I didn't create the problem. I didn't get us here, but I certainly am ready and willing and wanting to fix it. And that's kind of where I came out of this with and I think whomever reads this, when they see the justifications and the explanations behind what's being recommended, I don't know how you don't get behind it and say, yeah, we got to do it, whether it's more administrative staff, whether it's looking at the inequities in our high schools, whether it's looking at our assessment process, our monitoring process. Those to me are all things that can be done.
Yep.
It's going to take, I think the biggest task will be literally laying out the plan for how to do it. Literally that initial plan of taking each bite and what each bite is going to encompass and who's involved and how we do that. But yeah, at the end of the day yesterday, I took a big sigh, and then I had a conversation with a very trusted person in my family who knows a lot, and I was like, okay, I'm better now.
Yeah.
So those are my thoughts.
Yeah.
I'm willing to roll up my sleeves. I just thought, I felt I needed an antidepressant after I was reading this.
Oh, bless your heart.
That's the truth of the matter. If you look at the report, there's negativity throughout it. We're not doing this, we're not doing this, and I, and then I agree, with Senator Brumley, that we need to have a plan. Okay, we got a ways to go here. Where's the plan? And can you have it by next week, Dr. Cook? So there's a lot to do.
There's a lot
I'm
to
willing
do.
to roll up my sleeves and do my much what I can too. But it is pretty overwhelming. You did a great job. I mean, you really, when you talk about digging deep, you certainly did. And but it's a pretty devastating report. But I think if people in the audience get their hands on it and read it, they're going to have the same experience I had, which is kind of rolling your eyebrows and say, "Oh my God, we got a lot to do here."
I say never, I'm sure I said this to Dr. Cook, do not read that at work. When you get the draft, don't read it at the office. Go home, get in a big easy chair, get ready to get up and play ball with your kids or do something in the meantime that's fun once in a while, because you take it and it's heavy. But and I don't, I don't apologize for that, because I know what it did for us. I know what it did for us. I also know that you can bury it. And one of my districts did, buried it. And I left, and so did my boss. I mean, we both left because it was like, we're not doing this. But where we dug in and did the work, it was transformative. It wasn't magic. I had one of the research professors at Arizona State University said to me, "This is magic, Kay." I said, no, David, it's not magic. We have worked our heinies off, for a long time, a whole bunch of us, and it was everybody doing the work. There was no one person. It was this board that was centered. It was an administrative team that was centered. It was teachers that said, this is kind of fun. Let's go. Let's see what we can do. Let's see how but it doesn't happen overnight, I mean, you're talking about having kids carry the cognitive load in classrooms, and you're talking about curriculum that I'm confident there are teachers in your system right now that do whatever they want to do in terms of curriculum. That's not a slam. That's just the facts. I'm sure there are, and they're out there in every system, and I might have been one of those at one point. But when you figure it out, that look at the stuff has been created for me that can help me, but I also can be my own teacher. I can still be my own teacher, and I can teach my kids well.
I would say the inconsistencies that have happened kind of create that, some doing whatever they want, or some, and the shifts that we do for teachers, like, we're going this direction.
Yeah.
No, we're going this direction. Hey, wait a minute, throw that out. We're starting right here. I think that some of them get to a point where they're just like, okay, what are we really doing? And or I don't need to go that direction because it's going to change by the end of next year.
Yeah.
So I know Casey talked about consistency, and it is important, and we need to make sure when nobody in this room is going to bury this. I can guarantee that.
I'm glad, because it would really hurt my heart if you did.
I'm pretty sure.
I just want to give you your global themes in the recommendations, okay? You've read them all, so you know. Quality control is a big global theme in there. Policy and regulations are all the way through it. Systems and structure is global theme. That's a global theme you have going. Planning, intentional planning, implementation, and deployment. Redefining roles and collaboration. Really paying attention so that there's not duplicative roles, that you don't have 5 people doing the same job, but communication and how important that is. Feedback to the system. Being data-driven, evaluating where we're going. You can take this district to the next level. It's going to take trust, integrity, sincerity, transparency, through reliability and accountability. I'm going to skip through those and go to this piece, because this is it's just a little piece on change. And this is old change documents, but I still think that Lewin's stuff is some of the most important. He talks about unfreezing a system. And these are the things that I think you have to really, how do we unfreeze where we are right now and create the motivation for change, and then get the change process going, teaching all the time, professional development, written curriculum, the pieces that are in those recommendations, new ways of looking at things, and then there's a refreezing that happens. But you as a system are going to need some of that work to happen. Help your teachers and your principals and your administrators and you all to integrate changed behavior and attitudes into the normal way of doing things. Here's the assumptions behind his model. It involves learning something new and unlearning the old way of doing things. We all say change is, I love change until it happens to me. I don't necessarily love it when it happens to me, right? Change will not occur without motivation. Motivation is important, and people are the hub. They're the bottom of organizational change. Resistance is found even when change is desirable because it's hard to change. And this is another one, Cotter's 8 steps. He says you have to first establish a sense of urgency. You unfreeze the organization by creating that compelling reason why change is needed. Use the audit to help you. Use it as leverage to help you. Creating, and kids' quotes, I want to say. I think those kids' quotes are powerful. And then create that guiding coalition. A cross-functional, cross-level group of people with enough power to lead the change. You've got the players in place. Develop a vision and a strategy. That's going to be part of that work with strategic planning. How do you guide that process? Connect that strategic plan with this. Don't go off in a whole nother direction on your strategic plan. Connect them. Connect them. You don't have to recreate everything. Communicate the vision and the change. And it needs to be said over and over and over again. Empower folks. Eliminate barriers to change. Use target elements to change, to transform the organization. You need short-term wins. They need to be planned for and created, those short-term wins. Sometimes we call them low-hanging fruit. What are those pieces that you can do quickly and have good success right away with? Consolidate the gains and produce more change and anchor new approaches in the culture. Who we are we as Coeur d'Alene Public Schools, do we believe in continuous improvement? Do we want to keep getting better and better and better? I think you do. I think we heard it clearly as we visited with people and as we read quotes and as we read surveys. I think we heard it clearly. People love this place. They love living here. They feel like this is a family kind of a culture. That's important. But how do you get this continual improvement as part of that? Couple things. This is repetitive of what he said, or what the last slide showed. Recognize effort, communicate, and be transparent. And I think you model it in the way you handle this right now. How do you be transparent? Process sometimes is as important as the product. So letting people go through the process of dealing with things. And pay attention to the progress. Celebrate it. Find your benchmarks. Find your points in time that you can go, yoo-hoo, look what we just did.
Okay. I know we jumped through some of those findings really quick.
Yeah.
And there's one that
Yes.
I'd like to jump back to if
Yes, of
we could and
course.
just talk a little bit about it. It's in Standard 3.
Yes.
It's finding 3.4. And in your slide, what it says is current practices in the Coeur d'Alene Public Schools are leading to inequalities among schools. In the areas of graduation, student transfers, and full-day kindergarten. I think it references page 187.
Sorry, I'm flipping through the pages here.
187.
187. Yes. Yes.
Can we just talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's a big, not a shift, but to me, that's a big finding.
So there were those three areas.
Did you go back to
That-
that slide?
Oh, I'm sorry. Get to the slide, Kay. I can't be trusted on timer slides. Right there. So I think it's laid out clearly here, but basically, we are when we come in and look for that, we study a lot of things. We look at a lot of things to say, are there inequities in the system? And what are the things that we feel maybe some of those most important inequities that need to be addressed? And one of them was this full-day kindergarten piece where you had the south and the north, right? We had it in some schools. And then there was a forced transfer piece that was happening where a kiddo might live 2 blocks from a local school. Parents didn't realize school had started. The school went ahead and filled the seats because it was a school of choice. And then parents saw buses flying by. I'm not sure I'm describing it well, but and thinking, oh, school must have started, took their kid to the local school, and they were full. They didn't have any seats, so they got forced to be transferred. So that was happening in some of your lower socioeconomic schools. So that was just a piece that we felt compelled to put in there because we saw that as being a problem, and we heard about it. We saw it, we heard about it, and we pulled the data on it, and we could see that that was actually true. The full-day kindergarten was another one where that was, in some cases, you've got kids in the northern or wherever. I don't know north, south, east, west, but we did take a net map and look at it so we could figure out, was there a difference in these places? And we could see that there were some kids that can be an equity issue on something like full-day kindergarten, because kiddos, this isn't always the case, but sometimes the case, that children that come from a home that is really struggling financially to get by. Parents may be working 2 or 3 jobs, and they just simply don't have the time, if you will, to be reading with kids all the time. And some of those pieces that children, we say that our middle-class kiddos come to school having read 1,500 books since they were 3 years old with their parent, sitting on a lap reading 1,500 books or whatever the number is. And then we have children that come from economically disadvantaged families that truly don't even know how to handle a book. They don't know what the front of the book is and the back of the book is, and the print goes left to right. And so they're behind the 8 ball in literacy instruction right from the get-go. And so the importance of that kindergarten experience for a child like that is huge, because you start getting them enculturated into basic literacy as well as mathematics, etc. So those were the 2. And then the graduation requirements between the schools. And this was laid out, I think, on 188 on the bottom, where the required semester credits, the block schedule, and the Idaho semester credits. And there's this distinction of what's going on in terms of what kids' graduation requirements are different at the schools. This was pointed out, I believe, in that audit back in 2002. It was pointed out differently probably than we pointed it out, but because I remember I called the lead auditor once I realized that that you'd had this previous audit that had gone away someplace. And so I called and said, tell me about what are the things at the top of your head without looking at your document that you remember? And that was one of the things I think that was going on back then. There was a difference in graduation requirements. So it's some of that stuff that you just go, okay, let's pull up our big girl and big boy panties and get on with it. Let's fix this thing, because it's all fixable. It's just a matter of really being going through the process and doing it. So it's a different experience that your kids at one high school get than another, which is okay. But graduation requirements and block schedule is block schedule. But how does this translate when you're really a system of schools? I don't know that I explained that very well. Did I answer your question, Casey?
Yeah, I think so. On the high school one, to me, it's interesting that it was kind of looked at graduation requirements or course offerings. Kind of both of those are shown there, but not instructional minutes, because that's one that I think of as just, if you looked at core subjects between the two schools, there's significant difference in instructional time that a
Yes, there
student.
is. There is. And the kids pointed.
And that's an important piece to
And
me.
the kids pointed that out. Some of the quotes of those kids in Appendix P, I think there were some kids that pointed that. The group I was with had this big conversation back and forth across this room about the difference, but they were at a non-block schedule and the block schedule and the non-block schedule, and that was very interesting listening to their perspective, because what did they know? They weren't even on block schedule, but they were having that conversation back and forth about the pros and the cons. So I think this is like an issue you just have to dig into and figure it out for your own system. Is this okay, or is it not okay? Is this an equity issue for kids, or is it okay to be this way? You're going to have to figure that piece out. We can point the flashlight on it and say, here it is, but you're going to have to dig deep into it and trust your folks to do that. And come back with you and talk to you about it and give you the details and what they found. Kids think there are issues. Your students, your high school students think there are some issues. They think that they don't have the same opportunities that could impact them for the rest of their life relative to electives and
My opinion on this piece is that this will play very much into the role of profile of a graduate, because from my perspective in the workshop I attended, more electives and opportunity is what I'm seeing from that. I could be wrong, but I think that there is, just to quote the report, it says, an effective high school educational system provides opportunities for students to explore their interests through optional elective courses. And I didn't see, what you're talking about, Kay, I didn't see those quotes from kids in here. Maybe I missed them, but I do think that if kids see these numbers and recognize the lack of opportunity one school has over another, I just think we've got to, to go back to my first point is I truly do believe that the profile of a graduate will blend very well into this discussion about what we need to be offering our kids at the high school level.
I think you are right on. That is the right work at the right time, that profile of graduate work.
Yes. 5 to 7 on Thursday, right? 5 to 7 on Thursday at Hospice, which is the best facility in town. Let me tell you, oh my gosh, they have such a nice room for us. Last one, at least for now.
Well, there you've got it. What else can I do for you? I'm going to meet with all your administrative team tomorrow for 3 hours, I believe, and 3 or 4 hours.
I know a parent survey went out during this, and you talk about the parent survey and the number of responses. Can we get a copy of the results for the parent survey? I didn't see it in its entirety in this report, but I was just kind of curious, since we don't survey our parents on these issues that often, if we could get that as like an addendum to the report.
Let me process that. We could do that, I think. We work hard at trying to keep, I think I have to go back through and look at, we try to keep confidentiality in that, You had a huge response on parents. 1,900, I don't know. You had a bunch of parent response.
Yeah.
So I might not be able to give you, because I think in some cases there's names and so we might be able to pull it.
Don't need names. The one I felt like as I was reading through, I saw a lot of administrative comments, but I wanted to see more parent or community
Parents
member
were saying.
comments. And so if we could even just have those without the names.
Sure. Let me see what I can
That
do.
would be great.
I can probably figure out a way to summarize, give you, without getting down to the nitty-gritty on the people. We had a number of parents that came in and did individual interviews after taking the survey because they wanted to say more. Interesting. It's good.
700.
Okay, 700, did we do it?
Jennifer's got somewhere to be.
Keep going, but I'm just like, she's been badgered all night about time, and I thought we needed to give her kudos for being right there.
Thanks. Okay. Anything else? All right, I want to hear about the great things you're doing, all the way down to Arizona, okay? I always come back and check your website, the websites of the districts that I've led audits on, to say, what are they doing? Because I don't necessarily, some people stay in touch over time, but some don't. And so then it's like you have to just check in once in a while.
Okay, I know you're presenting tomorrow. Do you give the same kind of presentation to administrators and staff, or do you kind of tweak it more towards educator-minded?
They're gonna muck around with it a bit.
They are,
They're
okay,
gonna,
that's what I
yeah.
figured.
They're gonna do some real workshop-y kind of thing. So we're gonna do some jigsaws, and we're gonna have them read and report out and do some, yeah.
And who's attending that? I'm curious. Are we?
All of our principals and assistant principals are asked to attend. I would assume that they'll show up. This is a heavy lift, and so it's going to be difficult. We can't do near the justice of the presentation that Kay can, so we're excited for them. It's been on their calendar for quite some time. We knew this was the targeted date, and that's one of the reasons why we pushed so hard to meet the deadlines early on. So to get this turned around and available in the same academic year is actually a feat of a Herculean task. And so if you recall, we had some frustrations early on back in February trying to get it all pushed together to be able to turn it around so it was a part of this kind of preliminary driving work to be part of our strategic planning. So we're excited to present that first tomorrow with them, all APs and principals, and any other what I would like to call district administrators.
Do we have a plan then for our district administrators or principals to get this information to their staff? I know it's a heavy lift, but we're getting near the end of the school
Eventually.
cycle.
Yeah, eventually. This is going to be released to the public tomorrow at the close of business. And so part of what we want to do is at least give our administrators the morning to start processing this and just have some time to consume. It's a lot. And so we'll do some public communications. Scott has already started working on some of that. We're getting ready to establish a page on the website once we kind of go forward with this. So yes, there's going to be the cascading kind of communication. We'll do our best. It's one of the things you can't do with something like this is once you start to get it released, people are going to start passing it around or the link. But we'll continue with the communication. This isn't an emergent communication need. We want to get on it quickly, but what it is establishing the next steps for really the next 5 years. And so we want to make sure we do a thorough and great job in getting that out to all the entities that would be interested in it.
It would be nice for principals to have some time with their staff to just reassure them, like you're saying, this isn't an attack on teachers or staff. This is, a guide going forward. So maybe it's a Monday collaboration or just a time that our principals can sit down with their staff and have a deep conversation about it. I think would be helpful before school is out for the year.
Before you go, Kay, you have two really great slides. They're the last two, and we've had a lot of, I don't want to call it negative, we've had a lot of constructive criticism. And I really like these last two slides and want them highlighted for our public and whomever else might see this, because I think it's important, because it's about strengths.
Right, okay. And I didn't know exactly where I was going to put that. So here, I asked the audit team to just reflect on this district and their time here. And as I said, that this team has done 89 audits, so they've been around. They've done a lot of audits, a lot of different sizes. And so these are some of the things that were said. There's a remarkable sense of community in the district. There's an overriding sense of hope for students. Students like and admire their teachers. These are, I actually, they make me give me a little goosebumpies. Student writing samples at the high school level that's that 1,900 pieces of student work we looked at. The writing samples from the high school level had students engaged in extended writing experiences with opportunities to write narrative, argument, and informational pieces. That's amazing. That was really, very well done. And this was interesting because some student samples were submitted in art as well. And our offsite auditor is the person that actually did the analysis on the student samples, because she needed to she did not have time to talk to anybody. Just look at those samples. High quality samples of student work were submitted in art, really high quality, and all different mediums. So it was kind of a fun aside. She sent me pictures of, I probably should have taken some of those pictures and stuck them in these slides. These are your kids, by the way, these pictures. Students are excited to have opportunities to engage in real-world learning opportunities. We heard that clearly. Teachers communicated a desire for a strong, flexible curriculum and a clear assessment with easy access. There's a good start on assessments for the core curriculum. Overall achievement levels are a bit above state averages for students on state assessments. Learning environments are clean and well maintained. Individuals in schools and at the central office have done and continue to do a good job supporting and serving students. People are proud to be a part of the CDA family. Staff overwhelmingly express confidence in the superintendent's team, leadership, support, vision, and eagerness to take action on the defined vision for the future. So that was, yeah. And one of the things I think I didn't get translated in there, but the work that you have done this year in reaction to the challenges you had a year ago with mental health issues and suicides. One of our auditors, who is a superintendent in Texas, said, as I walked away from that district, I am just in awe of what they've done this year in this work that you've done with kids and teachers alike. And he said, I have been working ever since February on thinking about how getting my head wrapped around that for our system, because today our kids so need this. So, yeah, lots of good things. Don't forget that. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much. Okay. Well, meeting is adjourned. Thank you all. Thank you for being here.